A deadly drone swarm is racing toward a U.S. military base, and with no backup, Lieutenant Emma Viper Lawson in her F-16 is the only thing standing between them and destruction. Time's running out. Will she make it? Lieutenant Emma Viper Lawson taxied her F-16 along the runway, the roar of the engine a familiar hum beneath her. She ran through her pre-flight check one last time, everything in order. The F-16 wasn't the newest model, but it was reliable, just like her. Old, but fast. And it still packed a punch. Viper, this is Ice. You copy? The voice crackled in her headset. I hear you, Ice, Emma replied, her tone playful. Trying to keep up, or are you going to let me show you how it's done again? Sarah Ice Martinez, Emma's wingman and one of the few pilots who could keep pace with her, laughed. I'll be right behind you, as always. Just don't make me look bad in front of the new guys. Emma smirked, glancing at the cockpit mirror to see Ice's F-16 lining up beside her. Relics, huh? Keep talking, Ice. We'll see who's flying circles around who. She pushed the throttle forward, the F-16's engines roaring to life as the jet rocketed down the runway. The G-forces pressed her into the seat, the familiar pull of acceleration that never got old. The aircraft lifted off, rising into the sky with ease. It was a perfect day for a training run. The sky was clear, the air crisp, and the base was bustling with activity, nothing out of the ordinary. Emma felt the usual pre-flight jitters, the kind she always got before a mission. It wasn't fear, she'd been doing this for years. It was more like a familiar buzz, the kind that kept her sharp. Viper, Ice, brake left. We've got a bogey on the radar, came the commander's voice over the radio, pulling Emma's attention away from her thoughts. Copy that, Emma responded. Her fingers hovered over the controls, instinct kicking in. She flipped a switch, scanning the radar for the unknown target. It was small, fast, and moving in the wrong direction. Looks like we've got company, she said with a grin, twisting the joystick as her F-16 banked hard left. Let me guess, just another practice target? Ice asked, her voice still calm, but with a hint of humor. Emma checked the radar again, eyes narrowing. Not sure, but if it is, it's a little too fast for a practice run. The target was coming in fast, too fast for a typical training scenario. Emma's mind shifted into autopilot as she adjusted her course, readying her aircraft for a dogfight. Her hands moved over the controls with fluid precision. She could feel the F-16 responding beneath her, like an extension of herself. It wasn't the newest jet, but it was still a fighter. Still a weapon. Stay close, Ice, Emma said, voice steady. This might be a real one. As the target drew closer, Emma's radar locked onto it. It wasn't a drone, but an enemy aircraft, one she'd never seen before. A moment of silence passed before she spoke again, her tone a little sharper this time. We're not alone, Ice. Get ready. She dove toward the target, pushing her F-16 into a steep bank. The thrill of the chase surged through her as she fought to close the distance. There was something satisfying about the way the jet responded to her commands, smooth, powerful, like it was reading her mind. The target tried to break away, but Emma was faster. With a well-timed move, she locked onto it, and with a quick burst from her weapons system, the enemy aircraft was taken out. Target down, Emma said, her voice light again. Just another day at the office. Ice came up beside her, her voice tinged with admiration. I swear, every time you make it look too easy. How do you do it? Emma shrugged, glancing at Ice through her cockpit mirror. It's all about knowing the aircraft, Ice. And having a little fun while you're at it. They leveled off, heading back toward the base. Emma could see the familiar outline of the runway in the distance. But as the adrenaline wore off, a thought lingered at the back of her mind. The exercises today had been routine, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. Something that would test her and her F-16 like never before. All right, Ice, race you back to base, Emma said, already pushing her throttle forward. You're on, Ice replied, and the two jets sped toward the runway, the friendly competition easing the tension. But Emma couldn't fully shake the unease that clung to her. The calm was too perfect. Something told her that the real challenge was just around the corner. Emma had just finished her victory lap, gliding back toward the base with ice right behind her, when the calm was shattered. "Viper, Ice, this is command." The voice crackled through the comms, sharp and urgent. "All units, prepare for immediate engagement. We've got an incoming swarm." Repeat, a swarm of drones heading straight for the base. "All fighters, scramble." Emma's heart skipped a beat. The calm of the day suddenly felt too still. This wasn't part of the drill. Drones were one thing, but a swarm? She could feel the shift in the air, the weight of the command pulling her focus back to reality. "Roger that, command," Emma replied, her tone steady, but her pulse quickening. "Viper to Ice. Looks like the fun's just starting." "I hear you," Ice responded, but Emma could tell from the slight hitch in her voice that Ice was feeling it too. They were ready for drills, but this was different. Emma pulled her F-16 into a steep climb, her eyes scanning the skies. She didn't see anything at first, just the deep blue sky, the mountains in the distance. But then, there was a shift. A faint movement, almost imperceptible at first. Then it was everywhere. Hundreds. Thousands. Drones, black against the sky like a swarm of angry bees. "Holy hell," Emma muttered under her breath. "That's a lot of drones." "Viper, Ice, this is command." The voice interrupted, more urgent this time. "They're not just drones. We've identified them as combat-class drones. They're armed." Emma's mind raced. Combat drones? They had drones at the base, but nothing like this. Nothing this aggressive. "Ice, stay on me," Emma said, her voice firm now. "Let's make sure we don't get caught in the middle of this." "Copy that," Ice replied, but her words were tight. Emma could tell she was as rattled as she was. The drones kept coming, faster, angrier, like they had one mission: destroy. Emma checked her radar. It was lit up like a Christmas tree. She couldn't pick out individual drones anymore. They were everywhere, flooding the screen. Her heart pounded. "Viper, Ice, split up." The commander's voice broke through the chaos. "We need to thin out the swarm, ASAP." "Understood, command," Emma responded. She glanced at Ice as they made their split, the two jets zipping in opposite directions, diving and climbing to avoid the encroaching swarm. Emma's F-16 roared to life as she banked hard, locking onto a few of the drones. The missiles she fired barely made a dent. They evaded, flying with precision that rivaled her own. This wasn't a fight against machines, it was a fight against a whole new kind of war. "Damn it," Emma cursed under her breath, hitting the throttle hard. "Why won't they go down?" She pulled off a high-speed roll, dodging incoming fire from another drone. The missile warning blared in her headset. Emma slammed her fist on the countermeasures, deploying flares and jamming the targeting system. The drone following her swerved, but not fast enough. Emma locked onto it and took it down with a direct hit. But there was no time to celebrate. Another swarm, larger than the last, surged forward, and the first wave of drones was already back on her tail. "This is not good," Emma muttered, gritting her teeth. The drones were relentless, no hesitation, no fear. Just calculation. It was like they were hunting her. "Viper, Ice." The urgency in Ice's voice cut through the comms. "I can't shake these guys. I've got 3 on my 6. Need help." "I'm on it," Emma replied, banking hard toward Ice's position. She dove into the swarm, the F-16 cutting through the air as she locked onto the drones chasing Ice. With a quick burst from her cannon, she took one down and another with a missile. "Thanks, Viper." "But there's too many of them," Ice said, panic creeping into her voice. Emma didn't respond right away. Her mind was moving too fast. She knew they couldn't keep up this fight forever. "Ice, break left. Let's regroup with the others." As they broke off, Emma's eyes scanned the sky. They couldn't outrun these drones. They couldn't outfight them either, not like this. Not without backup. She could feel the weight of it settling in. "Command, we need reinforcements now," Emma said, her voice steady despite the rising panic in her chest. "We can't take them down alone." There was a pause on the other end of the comms, then the response came. "Negative, Viper. All available fighters are engaged. You're on your own." The air in Emma's chest seemed to leave her all at once. Alone. They were alone. This is getting real fast, Emma muttered, her fingers gripping the controls tighter. The drones kept coming. She had no idea how many were left, but it didn't matter. They'd fight or they'd die trying. The noise of the airfield was deafening as Emma brought her F-16 in for a rough landing. She touched down hard, the jet bouncing slightly before settling onto the tarmac. Her heart was still racing from the fight, but she couldn't let it show. The mission wasn't over yet. The moment her wheels stopped, she flicked off the engines, the roar of the jet's afterburners fading into the silence. Ice was already on the ground, taxiing her jet behind Emma. They both rolled toward the hangar, the weight of the mission sinking in with every footstep. As Emma climbed out of the cockpit, she felt the familiar jolt of exhaustion in her limbs. But there was no time to rest. No time for any of it. Command had already called for a debrief, and Emma knew what that meant. The battle wasn't over, it was just beginning. She met Ice outside the hangar. "You all right?" Emma asked, her voice light, though her eyes were sharp with concern. "Yeah, just shook up a bit," Ice replied, shrugging it off. Those drones, they were something else. Emma nodded, but before she could respond, the loud crackle of a radio interrupted. "Lieutenant Lawson, report to command ASAP," came the voice over the comm. "Copy that," Emma said, giving Ice a quick look before she turned and headed toward the command tent. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Officers and pilots gathered around, talking in low voices. At the front of the room, General Williams was standing, arms crossed, staring at the war map on the wall. Emma entered, standing at attention as the general's eyes met hers. "Lieutenant Lawson," General Williams began, his voice firm. "You're the best we've got. We need you to take point on this." Emma raised an eyebrow, her mind already whirring. "Take point on what, sir?" "On the drone swarm," the general replied, his gaze unwavering. "We've confirmed they're part of a larger attack. We need to take them out before they hit our primary defense grid. You're the only one with the skills to pull this off." Emma bit back a laugh, though the sarcasm almost slipped out. The only one? She was flying an F-16, an aircraft that had been around for decades, while the drones had cutting-edge technology. Her plane might be fast, but it wasn't exactly suited for the job. "I'm sorry, sir," Emma said, trying to keep her tone neutral. "But I'm still flying an old F-16. There's no way it's equipped to take down that many drones." The general looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once slowly. "You're right. The F-16 is outdated, but your experience is what we need. We don't have the luxury of waiting for reinforcements. You're the only pilot left who can handle this. You'll have to make do with what you've got." Emma's chest tightened. She hated the feeling of being backed into a corner, but she knew there was no getting out of this. She could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. She was the last line of defense. She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Understood, sir." General Williams gave her a sharp nod. "Get ready. We don't have much time." As Emma turned to leave, she caught sight of Ice, standing near the door, watching her closely. Emma walked over, trying to keep her expression neutral, though she knew Ice could read her like an open book. "Ready for round two?" Ice asked, her voice laced with concern but also determination. Emma gave a small, tired smile. "I guess I don't have much of a choice, do I?" Ice nodded, her eyes hard. "We'll do this. Together." Emma's mind raced as she headed back toward the hangar. She couldn't believe it was happening. 1,000 drones, and me in a 30-year-old jet. What could possibly go wrong? But there was no time to second-guess. She had a job to do, and she wasn't about to back down. The moment she climbed back into the cockpit of her F-16, she was all business. No more jokes, no more sarcasm. This wasn't a drill anymore. This was real. She glanced at the radar. The swarm was coming, and this time, there was no turning back. The moment Emma's F-16 shot into the sky, the weight of the mission settled heavily on her shoulders. She had no backup, no reinforcements, and an old jet that was barely holding its own against the drones. But she wasn't going to back down, not yet. She clicked on her comms. Ice, you still with me? Right behind you, came Ice's calm reply. Emma glanced at the radar. The drones were coming. She could see the blips, a swarm of tiny, fast-moving dots moving toward her position. She fought the tightening in her chest and focused on the task ahead. This wasn't the time for hesitation. You've got the first wave coming in hot, she muttered to herself, adjusting her throttle. Let's see what you've got. The first drone appeared on her radar, speeding toward her at an alarming rate. It was a small target, hard to lock onto, and Emma knew that her F-16's tech was no match for their advanced systems. Her radar kept jumping from signal to signal, as if the drones were multiplying before her eyes. Keep calm, Emma thought, and trust your instincts. She banked left, feeling the G-force press against her chest. She aimed the jet into a steep dive, the wind howling past the cockpit as the drone followed. She could hear the missile lock warning blaring in her ears. Not today, she thought, pulling back on the control stick, jerking the F-16 into a sharp climb. The drone followed her, but it was slower, more predictable. Emma smiled as she hit the countermeasures flares that sent the drone veering off course. She shot a glance at the HUD, confirming the missile had locked on. Gotcha, she said under her breath, releasing a missile that slammed into the drone. It exploded in a flash, but there was no time to celebrate. More drones were already swarming toward her. Ice, you're gonna need to keep those drones off my back while I make a run, Emma said, her voice steady but urgent. I'm on it, Ice replied, her calm voice a lifeline in the chaos. Emma's heart raced as she pulled her F-16 into another dive. The drones were relentless, keeping pace, not allowing her any space to breathe. Her radar flickered again, showing another wave of drones closing in fast. They were faster, better equipped, and they had the advantage of numbers. She felt a jolt of panic, but shoved it down. This wasn't her first fight. Come on, old girl, Emma muttered to herself, glancing at her instruments. The F-16 was creaking under the strain, but it was still holding together. She glanced to her left. Ice was in position, firing at a group of drones that had come too close. Emma quickly adjusted her flight path. The drones were closing in again, but this time, she was ready. She dove into the swarm, using the terrain below as cover. She flew low, hugging the ground as she weaved through mountains, forcing the drones to follow her into tight, narrow spaces. It was risky, but it worked. Her F-16 banked hard left, narrowly dodging a missile. Too close. She needed more time, but the drones weren't slowing down. Viper, I can't shake these guys, Ice's voice cracked through the comms, tinged with panic. I'm outnumbered. Hold tight, Ice. I'll get you some space, Emma said, forcing herself to stay calm. She dove low again, and as she pulled up, the drones following her collided with one another in midair. She couldn't help but grin, the thrill of the moment lighting a spark of relief in her. The explosion of metal and fire scattered drones in every direction, but there were still more. She wasn't done yet. All right, Ice, let's take them down together. You with me? Always, Ice replied, voice firm. Emma pushed the throttle forward, the F-16 roaring as she shot through the sky. The drones were relentless, but so was she. She locked onto another one, fired a missile, and watched it disintegrate into the air. But as soon as one went down, two more appeared. The numbers were too much. Emma knew she couldn't keep this up for long. Ice, we need to get back to base, now, she called out, her voice a little tighter than usual. Agreed, Ice said. Let's clear a path and get out of here. They both broke away, weaving through the final wave of drones. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burnt metal as they made their escape. Emma's hands were shaking as she checked the fuel gauge. They were low, and the jet was taking a beating. Almost there, Emma said, exhaling sharply. Let's get this over with. The airfield came into view as Emma pulled the F-16 into a final dive toward the runway. They had made it out alive this time. Emma's F-16 touched down on the runway with a thud, tires screeching against the tarmac as she brought the jet to a halt. The moment the engine shut off, a heavy silence settled in. The adrenaline from the fight still buzzed in her veins, but it quickly gave way to a crushing weight, the kind that only came when a mission went from routine to real. She unbuckled her harness, her fingers numb from gripping the controls for so long. The cockpit felt smaller now, more suffocating. It was supposed to be a training run. She was supposed to be back at the bar by now, laughing with the squadron, maybe even telling a few exaggerated war stories. But instead, she was standing alone in an aging fighter jet, the hum of the engines replaced by the echoing silence of an empty runway. "You good, Viper?" Ice's voice came through the comms, though there was no sign of her outside. Emma took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the darkening sky. "I'm fine, Ice," she said, but the words felt empty. She had told herself that. "I'm fine." But she knew the truth. She was alone. The squadron wasn't here. No one was flying beside her now. Not like before. Not with the same camaraderie, the same rhythm of working together. Ice was back at base. The rest of the squadron was scattered, their jets either out of commission or too far from the fight. And that left Emma, the only one with the skills, the experience, and the instinct to get the job done. She stepped out of the cockpit, the cold wind biting at her skin. The chill didn't do much to shake the heat she felt building inside her. Her hands still trembled slightly as she touched the side of the plane, grounding herself in the moment. "I can't do this alone," she thought, though she didn't voice it out loud. That would be admitting weakness. But the truth was there, nagging at her. She was used to working with a team, always having a wingman, always having someone to share the load. The idea of facing this alone, with no backup, felt more like a death sentence than a mission. She walked toward the hangar, the sound of her boots echoing in the silence. The base felt empty, like a ghost town. The world felt off-kilter without the usual noise of the squadron preparing for their next flight, without the chatter of pilots readying for action. It was just her, and 100 drones. Inside the hangar, General Williams was already waiting, arms crossed, face serious. Emma gave him a quick nod, but didn't say anything at first. She knew what he was going to say. "Lieutenant," he began, voice heavy with authority. "You did good out there. But we're running out of time. This next wave is coming fast. We need you to get back up there and take them out now." Emma met his eyes, her mind still clouded with doubts. She had barely gotten out of the first battle. She hadn't even had time to breathe. But she knew the drill. "I know, sir," she replied, the words coming out more flatly than she intended. "But I need more time. I can't keep this up alone. The drones are relentless." General Williams didn't flinch. "You're the only one we've got left. This mission needs to end tonight. You're the best chance we have." His words stung, but they weren't new. The weight of them pressed on her chest like a physical thing. She had always known she was good at this, always known she was capable. But now it was different. Now her skills were the only thing standing between them and disaster. She nodded slowly, more to herself than to him. "Understood, sir. I'll go back up." The words were hollow, but she couldn't back out. Not now. As she headed back toward her F-16, the weight of the mission settled deeper in her bones. This wasn't about skill anymore. This wasn't about just being a good pilot. This was about survival. And for the first time, Emma wondered if it was enough to carry her through. The moment she climbed back into the cockpit, the familiar hum of the jet felt like a distant comfort. She took a steadying breath. The drones would be back soon, faster, smarter, and deadlier than before. But so would she. Emma's F-16 soared through the sky once more, the sound of the engines vibrating beneath her. The cold wind whipped past the cockpit, but it was the rush of focus that kept her warm now. Her mission hadn't changed, take down the drones, protect the base, but the approach was different. She gripped the controls tighter, her eyes flicking back and forth between the radar and the horizon. The swarm of drones was already closing in on her position, but this time, something was different. They were moving in a pattern. "What are you up to?" Emma thought, squinting at the blips on her radar. The drones had been chaotic before, but now they seemed almost coordinated. It was as if they were following a plan, not just chasing her around. She studied their formation, watching as they zigzagged through the sky, but always in the same general direction. "Viper, you good?" Ice's voice came over the comms, breaking her concentration for just a moment. "Yeah, I'm good," Emma said, her eyes narrowing. "I think I've got something." "Watch the drones. They're moving in a pattern. Almost like they're trying to herd me somewhere." "Herd you? Are you sure?" Ice asked, her voice skeptical. Emma leaned forward, focusing on the radar again. "I'm telling you, Ice. They're not just chasing me. They're funneling me somewhere." She glanced down at her instruments. There was a stretch of rugged terrain below, rocky hills and valleys that might give her a way to get the upper hand. The drones were fast, but they couldn't follow her through that terrain. Not the way she could. Emma pushed the throttle forward, her F-16 roaring back to life. She dove toward the ground, the terrain growing closer with every passing second. She could see the rocky outcroppings below, the narrow passes she could use to her advantage. If she could get the drones to follow her down there, they'd be too slow to keep up. "You with me, Ice?" Emma called over the comms, her voice steady but with an edge of excitement. "Yeah, I'm here." "What are you thinking?" Ice replied. "I'm thinking we've got a chance," Emma said, the corner of her mouth lifting in a grin. "We're going to use the terrain. Follow me." She angled the F-16 into a steep dive, threading it through the jagged rocks. The sound of the air rushing by grew louder, and the warning lights on her dash flashed briefly as the jet pushed into a dangerous descent. But Emma didn't flinch. She was in her element now, her hands moved instinctively, guiding the F-16 through tight turns and narrow gaps in the cliffs. The drones followed her too closely. They didn't have the agility or speed to keep up in the narrow passes. Emma could see them in the distance behind her, their movements slowing as they tried to navigate the same terrain. "Ice, hit them now," Emma ordered, her voice calm but firm. From the corner of her eye, she saw Ice's F-16 dive in from the other direction, taking advantage of the gap Emma had created. With precise timing, Ice locked onto one of the drones and fired. The missile tore through the air, obliterating the drone in a burst of flame. "Nice shot," Emma called out. "Keep it up." They weaved through the rocky landscape, using every twist and turn to their advantage. The drones were still coming, but now they were scattered, unable to keep up with Emma's relentless maneuvering. She used the cover of the hills to shield herself, popping up just enough to take shots at the drones when they followed her into the open. One by one, the drones began to fall. Emma didn't let up, her focus razor-sharp as she moved in and out of the rocky canyons, making sure to stay one step ahead. "I think we've got them, Ice," Emma said, watching as the last few drones dropped from the sky. "That was too close, but we did it." Ice's voice came through the comms, a hint of relief in her tone. "Yeah, but we're not done yet. The next wave could be worse." Emma took a deep breath, wiping the sweat from her brow. She wasn't ready to celebrate just yet. The first wave had been tough, but it was just a warm-up. The real challenge was still coming. But for now, she had done what she needed to do. "Let's get back to base and reload," Emma said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "We've got a bigger fight ahead." The sky above was clear, but Emma's senses were on high alert as her F-16 streaked through the air. The adrenaline from the earlier battle still had her heart pounding, but she knew she couldn't afford to let up. The drones were relentless, and every minute that passed, they seemed to get smarter, faster. "Viper, we've got another wave coming in," Ice's voice came over the comms, tense but steady. "They're faster this time. Keep your head on a swivel." Emma gripped the controls tighter, eyes flicking over her radar. Sure enough, another set of drones appeared on the screen, this time, larger and more menacing. They were closing in fast, and she didn't have the luxury of a break. "I'm on it," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the knot of worry forming in her stomach. She twisted the throttle, banking the F-16 hard to the left. Her eyes scanned the horizon for the incoming swarm. They were using the same pattern again, tight, coordinated movements that showed they weren't just random drones. This was a full-on assault, and they were being strategic. Emma's radar beeped, and she flinched as the screen flashed red. Missile lock. Her stomach dropped as the tone of the warning alarmed her, a high-pitched beep echoing in her headset. She snapped her head around, scanning for the source of the lock. There it was, one of the drones, now right behind her, locking onto her position. The missile was coming fast. She could already see it in her mind, an explosion that would tear her F-16 apart. "Viper, evade!" Ice shouted, her voice cutting through the panic building in Emma's chest. Emma didn't need to be told twice. Her hands flew over the controls, instinct taking over as she yanked the jet into a violent roll. The G-forces pressed her into the seat, but she didn't care. She fought to stay focused, eyes darting across the cockpit, trying to outmaneuver the missile. The missile was still there, trailing her, but it was getting closer. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each second stretching longer than the last. She hit the afterburners and pushed the jet forward, trying to break free from the missile's lock. The roar of the engines filled her ears, but the missile didn't give up. "It's not enough," Emma thought in the split second before she made a sharp turn, pulling up and diving again, threading through a narrow pass in the terrain below. Come on," she muttered, watching the missile trail her every move like a shadow. Just as she came up over a cliff, she deployed flares, watching them streak across the sky, creating a distraction. The missile veered off course, just as Emma slammed the stick to the side, pulling the jet into a tight loop. She watched through the cockpit glass as the missile exploded, miles away from her position. That was too close. She couldn't breathe for a second. Her hands were still shaking, but she fought to calm her racing pulse. "One more like that, and I'm done." "I don't know how you do it, Viper," Ice's voice came through the comms, relief in her tone. That was way too close. Emma let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Yeah, I'm not exactly sure either," she replied, trying to keep her tone light, but the weight of what had just happened settled heavy on her chest. She glanced down at the fuel gauge. It was dangerously low. Her F-16 had taken a beating, and while she was still alive, she didn't know how much longer that would last. She pushed the jet higher into the sky, trying to regain some altitude. "Ice, we got to head back to base. I'm out of options here." "Agreed," Ice responded, sounding strained. "Let's get out of here while we can." Emma pushed the throttle as far as it would go, the F-16 climbing toward the clouds. Her eyes scanned the sky again, but for now, the drones had backed off. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The real fight was still coming, and this time, she wasn't sure she'd make it out in one piece. Emma's F-16 cut through the sky, but every movement felt slower now. She was running on fumes, both the jet and herself. Her hands were sore, her mind foggy from the constant battle. The drones had kept coming, wave after wave, but the last few had been different. They were more organized, more precise. The swarm wasn't just a collection of machines, it was a system, a network that needed to be shut down. "Viper, I've got a crazy idea." Ice's voice came through the comms, sharp and focused despite the exhaustion in her voice. "We need to target the control system. If we can disable that, the drones won't be able to work together anymore." Emma's heart skipped a beat. The idea was risky, ridiculously so. But the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. If they didn't stop the command center, the drones would keep coming. They wouldn't stop. "The problem is," Ice continued, "we don't have the firepower to target it from here. You're going to have to get in close enough to reach the control link. It's a suicide mission, Viper." Emma's stomach dropped. She wasn't new to danger, hell, she thrived on it. But this was beyond anything she had ever faced. The F-16 was old, its systems outdated. There was no way she could pull off such a close-range strike without putting herself directly in the line of fire. "Are you telling me to fly straight into the heart of the swarm?" Emma said, her voice a little tighter than usual. "You've got to be kidding." "I'm not kidding," I said, no humor in her tone. "The only way to stop them is to get in close, real close. The control link is there in the heart of the swarm. You can't fight them off forever, Viper. You need to end this." Emma's grip tightened on the controls. She looked at the radar. More drones were closing in. Time was running out. She glanced at the fuel gauge, now dangerously low. If she didn't make a move soon, she'd be out of options. It's now or never. I'll do it, Emma said, though her voice didn't sound as confident as she wanted it to. But you need to cover me. I won't make it without you. I'll be right behind you, Ice promised. Just don't do anything crazy. Emma laughed bitterly. That ship sailed a long time ago. She didn't give herself time to second guess. She pulled the F-16 into a steep climb, then dove toward the swarm. The world outside blurred as the wind roared past her, the familiar hum of the engine louder than ever. Her heart was pounding now, each beat a drum in her chest. The drones swarmed in every direction, an endless mass of cold, mechanical precision. She could see them coming at her, missiles locked, targeting systems active. This is it, Emma thought, the pit in her stomach deepening. There's no way back from this. She flew straight into the center of the swarm, the closest she'd ever been. The drones closed in fast, faster than she expected. She twisted and turned, trying to stay ahead, but they were everywhere on her tail, in front of her, on all sides. A missile warning blared in her headset, but she didn't flinch. She was too focused. Emma's F-16 screamed through the sky, and for a split second, she felt like she was weightless. The control link was just ahead, almost within reach. Now, she thought. Now. She slammed the F-16 into a hard left turn, using the momentum to swing the jet closer to the center of the swarm. She dove under a line of drones, dodging missiles, barely avoiding a direct hit. The ground was rushing up, but she didn't care. She had to get close enough to disable the drone system for good. She could feel the tension in her chest, the sweat pooling at her back. But she pushed it all aside. Her instincts kicked in, guiding the jet with deadly precision. She had one shot. Viper, you're going to make it. Ice's voice crackled through the comms. Emma's eyes locked onto the control link, the pulse of the system visible in her HUD. It was right there, vulnerable for just a moment. With a deep breath, Emma took the shot. Emma's heart was pounding as she pulled away from the center of the swarm. She had done it. She had done it. The pulse of the control link was still fresh in her mind as she watched the missile streak across the sky, the explosion sending shockwaves through the air. But what happened next was something she hadn't expected. The moment the link went down, the drones immediately began to falter. Their coordinated movements turned erratic, their once synchronized flight paths spiraling into chaos. Emma glanced at the radar, eyes widening as the once unified swarm began to splinter. What the hell? Emma muttered under her breath, her fingers still hovering over the controls as the drones scattered in every direction. This wasn't part of the plan. The drones, no longer able to communicate with each other, turned on one another. Some continued to pursue Emma and Ice, while others collided in midair, triggering massive explosions. It was like watching a series of car accidents unfold in slow motion. One after another, drones dropped from the sky, their once precise movements now completely unpredictable. Ice, you see this? Emma asked, her voice tight with disbelief. I see it, Ice replied, her voice tense. What the hell happened? They're all over the place. Emma quickly adjusted her flight path, pulling into a wide loop to avoid the growing wreckage. She had to admit, it was kind of beautiful in a sick way. Watching all those drones, once so determined, now crashing into each other like mindless drones in a panic. But she couldn't let herself get distracted. There were still a few out there that had regained some semblance of order. And they were coming fast. We need to clean up the last few, Emma said, her voice steady. They're still a threat. I'm on it, Ice responded, her tone sharp. Let's mop up this mess. The two pilots worked in tandem, picking off the remaining drones one by one. Emma's F-16 zoomed through the chaos, firing missiles with precision, her hands moving with practiced ease. She locked onto another drone, releasing a missile just as it veered toward her tail. It exploded in a burst of fire, sending debris spiraling into the sky. Her eyes darted to her HUD. Another wave of drones was approaching, this time even more scattered. They had no leader, no control. But they still had firepower. Emma wasn't ready to let her guard down yet. The swarm was breaking apart, but it wasn't over. One more drone locked onto her position, its targeting system blinking red on her screen. Emma's breath caught. It was too close. She yanked the stick hard to the left, narrowly avoiding the missile, then twisted the jet into a barrel roll. The missile followed her, but with a quick flick of the wrist, she deployed countermeasures. The drone veered off, its missile flying harmlessly into the sky. "Shit, that was too close," Emma muttered, wiping the sweat from her brow. But even as she spoke, the remaining drones began to fall apart. One by one, they collided in the sky, the remnants of a system that had once been a well-oiled machine, now a chaotic mess of twisted metal. "It's over," I said, a note of disbelief in her voice. "You did it. They're falling apart." Emma let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "I don't know if I'd call it over yet," she said. "We've got to make sure they don't regroup." The last few drones were dropping fast now. Emma looked around, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger, but it was over. The sky that had once been filled with the sharp hum of drone engines was now eerily silent. "They're all gone," I said softly, the disbelief in her voice slowly giving way to a quiet relief. Emma exhaled slowly, trying to process what had just happened. She had succeeded. They had done it. The swarm had been stopped, but not without cost. Her F-16 was barely holding together, and the weight of the mission still pressed heavily on her chest. But for now, she had a moment to breathe. "Let's head back," Emma said, her voice a little more exhausted than she intended. "We've still got a long way to go." The F-16 soared through the sky, a quiet hum filling the cockpit as Emma and Ice made their way back to base. The chaos of the battle was behind them now, the drones scattered like debris after a storm. For a brief moment, Emma allowed herself to relax. She leaned back in her seat, eyes scanning the horizon, the weight of the mission starting to lift from her shoulders. "I've got to admit, that was one hell of a ride," Ice said over the comms, her voice tinged with relief. "I thought for sure we weren't going to make it out." Emma let out a soft laugh, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, me too. But we did it. We stopped them." She glanced at her instruments. The radar was clear now. No more missiles locked. No more drone blips. Just the calm, empty sky. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people left on Earth. "Let's head home, Ice," Emma said, her voice more tired than she realized. "We've got this one in the bag." "I hear ya. Just hope we're not gonna have to do this all over again tomorrow," Ice replied, but there was a lightness in her voice now. The worst was behind them, at least that's what they both hoped. Emma pulled the F-16 into a gentle climb, guiding the plane toward the airfield. Her thoughts drifted back to the fight, her close calls, the moments when she thought they wouldn't make it. But they had, and it felt like victory. A victory hard won, but a victory nonetheless. "Base is in sight," she said, scanning the runway ahead. She was eager for the familiar comfort of solid ground beneath her feet. The thought of being on the ground, away from the chaos of the sky, was almost too appealing to resist. But then, a flash on her radar caught her eye. Emma's pulse skipped. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as the blips on the screen suddenly multiplied. Her heart dropped into her stomach. "What the hell is that?" she muttered, adjusting her controls to get a clearer view. "Ice must have seen it too." "Viper, what are you seeing?" Emma's mind raced. The shape on the radar wasn't just a few rogue drones. It was a large, organized formation, far larger than anything they had faced before. She could tell from the way it was moving that this was no coincidence. This was a new swarm, a much larger one. "I don't know yet, but it's not good," Emma said, her voice tight. "This looks like a bigger threat. I think they've adapted." The horizon was filling with dots, shadows growing larger and darker. Emma's gut twisted. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Ice, we need to get back to base." "We don't have the firepower to handle this right now," Emma said, her mind already working through the options. They were too far from any reinforcements, too low on fuel, and her F-16 was barely hanging on after the last fight. But Ice's voice came through, a trace of concern beneath her calm exterior. "Viper, don't tell me you're thinking what I'm thinking." Emma didn't answer right away. She was thinking the same thing. If they didn't do something now, this swarm would reach the base. And the base wouldn't survive. We're gonna have to take them out, Emma said, her voice low but resolute. We can't let them get any closer. Not this time. Her stomach twisted as the reality of the situation hit her. They had just survived the first wave, and now it looked like they had to face something even worse. She glanced at the horizon once more. The dark mass of drones was growing larger, filling the sky like a storm cloud. This isn't over, Ice, Emma said, her voice harder now, determination setting in. We've got a fight on our hands. The base was close, but so was the swarm. And Emma knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. If Emma's story inspired you and reminded you of the strength we all have inside, hit that like button and subscribe to join us on more journeys of courage and resilience. Your support makes all the difference.